Olá, boa tarde, sejam muito bem-vindos a mais uma live do Tribunal de Contas do Paraná, organizada pela Escola de Gestão Pública. Desta vez, o assunto a ser debatido é sustentabilidade na administração pública, com convidados que são referência no tema. Antes de passarmos efetivamente ao tema, os convido a seguirem o Tribunal de Contas do Paraná nas redes sociais. Nós estamos hoje no Facebook, no Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn e também no YouTube. Aliás, curtam o nosso canal no YouTube e também deixem seu like, ativem o sininho para receber a atualização da nossa programação, nossa, do TCE e também da Escola de Gestão Pública. Acompanhe os nossos cursos e lives. Estão conosco para esta live, representando o presidente do Tribunal de Contas do Estado do Paraná, conselheiro Fábio Camargo, o diretor-geral em exercício, Flávio Sampaio, e também o procurador do Ministério Público junto ao Tribunal de Contas, Dr. Flávio Berti. Como palestrantes nessa tarde, contamos com as ilustres presenças do coordenador do programa Uma Abordagem Territorial para os Objetivos do Desenvolvimento Sustentável, que apoia cidades e regiões na implementação dos ODS em vários países parceiros da OCDE, Stefano Marta, e também o auditor federal de controle externo do Tribunal de Contas da União, Dachiel Velasque da Costa. Um aviso bastante importante: todas as apresentações, inclusive a mediação, serão feitas em inglês. Aqui abaixo, na descrição do vídeo, haverá um link para quem tiver necessidade da tradução simultânea. A Escola de Gestão programou uma sala especial para a tradução simultânea, então as palestras e também a mediação, a partir na sequência da abertura, serão feitas em inglês, e você, se tiver dificuldade, pode acessar o link aqui embaixo e acompanhar a tradução simultânea. Para a abertura deste encontro, convidamos a trazer a mensagem do presidente conselheiro Fábio Camargo, o diretor-geral em exercício, Flávio Sampaio.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Flávio Sampaio, Deputy General Director, and it's an honor to have this opportunity to open such an important event, which will cover sustainability in public administration, one of the great commitments of President Fábio de Souza Camargo in the state of Paraná Court of Accounts. As our ceremonial just presented, we welcome our guest lecturer, Dr. Stefano Marta, coordinator of the Territorial Approach to the SDGs program at the OECD, an international organization that works together with governments, policymakers, and citizens to build better policies for better lives, with over 60 years of experience on building the world of tomorrow. We also want to welcome the Federal Court of Accounts in the name of the public auditor and our second guest lecturer in this event, Dr. Dachiel Velasque da Costa. As mediator to this event, we also welcome our public prosecutor from the Public Prosecution Office dedicated to the State of Paraná Court of Accounts, Dr. Flávio de Azambuja Berti. We are sure to have a very enlightened and informative event, which we sincerely hope you all enjoy.
Obrigada, Flávio. Passamos à programação proposta para essa tarde. São os nossos palestrantes, Stefano Marta e Dachiel Velasque da Costa. Stefano coordena atualmente o programa Uma Abordagem Territorial para os Objetivos do Desenvolvimento Sustentável. Também coordenou o projeto da OCDE sobre a reformulação da cooperação descentralizada para o desenvolvimento. Anteriormente, liderou a iniciativa adotando uma abordagem territorial para a política de segurança alimentar e nutrição, desenvolvida em conjunto pela Organização das Nações Unidas para a Alimentação e Agricultura, FAO, OCDE e o UNCDF. Ele também trabalhou em vários outros projetos, incluindo em ligações urbano-rurais no Marrocos e em indicadores territoriais na Tunísia. Antes de ingressar na OCDE, Stefano trabalhou na FAO, na abordagem territorial da política de segurança alimentar e nutrição. Além disso, fez parte da força-tarefa da FAO para a formulação da Estratégia de Agricultura Sustentável e Desenvolvimento Rural 2040, de Oman, e também participou do Programa de Desenvolvimento da FAO na Síria. Dachiel é auditor federal de controle externo no TCU, bacharel em Comunicação Social com habilitação em Publicidade e Propaganda. Liderou a Auditoria Coordenada na preparação dos governos latino-americanos para a implementação dos Objetivos do Desenvolvimento Sustentável, trabalho realizado conjuntamente com outros 11 países no âmbito da OLACEFES e reconhecido pela ONU como boa prática na implementação da Agenda 2030. Participou ainda como mentor no programa Auditing Sustainable Development Goals, desenvolvido pela Intosai em parceria com a ONU. Também queremos agradecer ao seu diretor, da Shiel, que está conosco na sala, Carlos Lustrosa. Muito bem, muito boa tarde, seja muito bem-vindo. Para conduzir os trabalhos desta tarde, convidamos como mediador o procurador do Ministério Público junto ao Tribunal de Contas, Flávio Berti, autor de diversos livros, o mais recente deles, lançado agora em outubro pela editora Dialética, curso de Direito Financeiro e Orçamentário. Parabéns e bem-vindo, doutor Flávio. Boa tarde.
Boa tarde, Carol. Good afternoon, Stefano. Good afternoon, Dashiel. Eu vou me permitir, Carol, só fazer breves considerações e breves palavras aqui em português para aquele pessoal que nos acompanha aí pelo canal do YouTube. Reiterando aquele teu convite, teve muita gente que acabou entrando agora, a propósito da tradução simultânea, criada uma sala, mas pelo Zoom. Então, quem estiver eventualmente acompanhando a live do Tribunal de Contas pelo canal do YouTube e precisar da tradução simultânea, precisa ter o aplicativo do Zoom instalado aí no seu smartphone. Vamos começar, então. Stefano, buonasera a lei, un piacere averla qua, questo pomeriggio in Brasile. I'm going to talk in English, obviously, because we have the interpretation in the Zoom digital class. It's a pleasure to have you here with us this afternoon. And the topic of sustainable development is very important in all over the world, especially in countries as Brazil. I would like you to tell us about the sustainable development, the goals of it defined by OECD, and a speech of you, if it's possible, with a kind of approach about the programs coordinated by you in OECD. We know, Stefano, that in the territorial approach, the state of Paraná, here in Brazil, was one of the experimental pilots in the program of monitoring about the achievement of these goals from OECD. I tell you, Stefano, that Tribunal de Contas of Paraná, the regional court of accountants here in Paraná, has inaugurated a special system about the goals, which must be achieved by regional government of Paraná, of state of Paraná, mainly through recommendations done to the regional government by the TCU through its third inspector session 2 years ago. It would be great, Stefano, if you told us something about the instruments, the tools of the program developed by OECD to monitor and verify the indicators of SDGs in the different countries, especially related in public administration in countries as Brazil, United States, Europe, etc. Welcome again. It's a pleasure to have you here in the name of the Business School of Management Public and Tribunal de Contas of Paraná. I invite you to start your speech. Thank you for your presence.
Thank you very much, Flavio, for the nice introduction, for the nice Italian words. Now I really feel at home. I always felt at home when I was coming to Brazil, and it's the same with this webinar. Let me quickly share my presentation, my screen for the presentation. Sorry. Let me find it. 1 second. No. Okay, I hope you can see them. Sorry for the time it took me. So Flavio, as you said, I'm Stefano Marta, and I'm the Sdg Coordinator of this program called the Territorial Approach to the Sustainable Development Goals, which is really now the international framework agreed by OECD countries, United Nations countries, and together with civil society organization on what is sustainability and how to measure sustainability towards 2030. With this program, what we are doing is indeed working with some cities and some regions in OECD and in some partner countries like Brazil. And we are supporting the public administration to use the Sustainable Development Goals, so this framework of sustainability, to include, to strengthen the sustainability dimension of their policy, the strategy, their action, and their programs. So in my presentation, I'm going to highlight, to tell you what we are doing on this program, which are the concrete tools that we are using to support the public administration on this, and also which are some of the findings of the program so far, including from the state of Paraná. Here is the outline of my presentation. Maybe I will start with a quick introduction about the OECD, because so everybody is on the same page about also what my organization is doing. Then a quick introduction on the program, the Territorial Approach to the SDGs, and then again how the SDGs can be used by local administration, by public administration to address some of the territorial development challenges, including and in particular now in the context of the COVID-19 recovery. And finally, I will present some of the findings of the work that we have been doing with the state of Paraná. What is the OECD? The OECD is an international organization that is composed by 37 member countries, let's say the richest economies. I lost my screen. I think someone is controlling my screen.
Let me just ask you some help, Stefano, for somebody that could help us in this moment. Okay.
Now, can you see it? Okay. So the OECD, last year, basically, we turned 60. It was our birthday. And the OECD is composed by 37 member countries, basically the richest economies. And but we don't only work with our member countries. We also work a lot with some partner countries. In Latin America, we work very much with Brazil in particular, with Argentina, with Colombia, with Peru, and with many other countries. And what we do is to support the member countries on 4 main areas. The first thing that we do is to provide policy advice, policy recommendation on how to develop a better policy for better life, as it was also stressed in the introduction. The second key role of the OECD is really to inform decision-making using, in particular, data analysis, indicator, and also through identifying best practice and promoting the exchange of experience between member countries and between member countries and other partner countries. And we do this also through one of our main products are the peer-to-peer country reviews. And this is also used to, the CD basically works as a forum, and it's very useful because it promotes the exchange of experience and knowledge between our members. And we do this also at the local level, and I will tell you how we did it for Paraná in particular. We promoted an exchange of experience between the 10 pilots of our program on a territorial approach to the SDGs. And what we do is also to regularly maintain and to update our databases, our tool, our analysis. I will present one tool that we developed to measure sustainability at the local and the regional level. It's a web tool that is publicly available, and it is updated every 2 or 3 years by the OECD. Me and I'm from the Center for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions and City. That is the department of the OECD that is working with subnational government, in particular, in addition to SMEs and entrepreneurs. What we do, I'm from the division of cities, urban policy and sustainable development, and we support member countries, states, regions, and cities with three main tools. The first one is data, and we develop an example is the OECD. Here you have the Metropolitan Explorer, that is a database that is measuring well-being for all the metropolitan areas in OECD countries. But in addition to that, we have many others, including the one on the SDGs that I will present in a few slides. The second big pillar of our work are the reports, and what we do is to develop a report at the country level, at the city level, and also thematic analysis. For example, the report on Paraná was a subnational review, subnational policy dialogue. We do many country reviews directly with the national government. And then we have the thematic reports. That what they do, the thematic report, is to collect cross-cutting findings and analysis from different countries or different cities and regions, and identify some common recommendations, some common good practice that can be used also by other countries of the OECD and the partner countries. And finally, the third big pillar of our work are the policy network. We have a network that is called the Champion Mayor, with more than 60 mayors that are working on inclusive growth. We have many other networks, and one network that is particularly relevant for this presentation today is the one called OECD Roundtable of Cities and Regions for the SDGs. It is a community of practice that gathers every 6 months, more or less, virtually in this period, and is used to share experience, good practice on how to localize the SDGs. What the program is about. The Territorial Approach to the SDG program was launched about 3 years ago at the World Urban Forum in New York, and has three main objectives. The first objective is to learn how public administration, in particular, can use the SDGs at the local and regional level, can use the Sustainable Development Goal as a framework to shape their local and regional development policy, and to include and to strengthen the component of sustainability in their local development plan and policy. How they can use the SDGs also to manage trade-off across sectoral policy, because sometimes we know that we need to take a decision between a specific goal that is maybe has a social dimension, a goal that has a more economic dimension, a goal that has a more environmental dimension, and sometimes we need to manage also the trade-off among these three dimensions. So the SDGs can help to do so. And they can also help to identify priorities at the local level and to allocate budget. And finally, the SDGs, we are also analyzing how the SDGs, and I will present some example in my speech, can help to strengthen the multi-level governance dimension. So the coordination between municipalities, states, and the federal government. And this is one of the components. The second component is about measuring. And so what we are doing is working at two different levels. The first level is we develop a web tool that is measuring the progress towards the SDGs for more than 600 regions and more than 600 cities in OECD countries. So it's a public good that every city and every region can use to measure sustainability. And then what we are doing is for the 10 pilot of our program, the one that you can see in the slide, and the state of Paraná is one of them. It is the only state in Brazil that is working currently with us on this program, and is the second pilot that we have in Latin America, in addition to the province of Córdoba in Argentina. What we are doing is to use the OECD localized indicator framework, integrate this framework with the data and information that our pilot, in this case, the state of Paraná, provided us, and we are providing an assessment of the strengths and weaknesses or areas of improvement of each of these pilot in terms of SDGs and sustainability. And in addition to that, we have the third objective, that is really to promote an exchange of experience and good practice among the pilot that are part of our program, and we are doing this to do a CD roundtable of cities and regions for the SDGs. Why the SDGs are important for a public administration? Because we think at the OECD that the SDGs can be a tool to implement what we call a new regional development paradigm, a new territorial development paradigm. And this paradigm has three main dimensions, as opposed to the traditional approach to regional development. This paradigm, this approach to regional development is based on the idea, on the need to shift from a sectoral to a multi-sectoral approach, the need to shift from a one-size-fits-all approach, universal solution, where basically we implement the same policy in the whole country without considering the context-specific needs and opportunities, while the new paradigm really consider this context-specific needs and opportunities of each state and of each territory. And the third component is a shift from a top-down policymaking, where everything is decided in the capital and then implemented in the territories, towards a more inclusive bottom-up approach to policymaking, where local government, regional government, the federal government, they really work together to design a policy and to implement the policy. And the SDGs really provide a framework to implement this new approach to policymaking. The main achievement of the program, I already mentioned some of them, so I can be quite brief on this. One is the OECD Localized Indicator Framework, and I have some specific, and the web tool, and I have some specific slide on that. You can just see this in the slide, this wheel with the 17 goals and the performance of regions and cities in OECD countries towards the goal. The second outcome of this program so far is the synthesis report and the checklist for public action to localize the SDGs. Then we have the specific pilot report, and we have a specific report on Paraná, for example, that you can find online. And then we have the community of practice with the OECD Roundtable of Cities and Regions for the SDGs. Moving towards this famous indicator framework that I've been mentioning so far, the OECD Localized Indicator Framework for the SDGs, it currently includes about 135 indicators that are allowing the OECD to measure progress for the 65 out of the 105 targets that are behind, that we identify as relevant for cities and for region. As you may know, the SDGs include 169 targets. At the OECD, we saw that 105 out of these 165 targets are really relevant for cities and regions. So about 65% of the target of the SDGs, we also say cannot be achieved if cities and regions are not engaged. And the good news is that we managed to find in data and indicators for each of the 17 SDGs. The blue bar are the regions, so the state in Brazil, and the gray one are the municipalities, the city, or as we call it, the city, the functional urban area. So you can see that we have a better coverage for the regions. And for some SDGs, we have a higher coverage than for other, like for SDG 8 on growth and job, or SDG 16 on peace and institution, or SDG 1 on poverty. We have many indicators. For others, we have a sort of less coverage. This is the visual, the OECD visualization tool that I was mentioning. So you can just go online at this link, and you will see how the cities and the regions in the OECD countries are performing. This is a public good open for everybody. And which are some of the findings from this analysis that we developed with our indicator framework. The first key findings is that even in OECD countries, cities and regions are not on track for most of the SDGs. We can see that for the regions in the OECD countries correspond to the states in Brazil. The main gaps for the regions are the climate objective, the energy objective, the biodiversity ones, and the industry and innovation objective behind the SDGs. For the city, the main gaps are industry and innovation, climate, biodiversity, and energy. And for both cities and regions, the gender SDGs is a big gap. So there is a lot of work to do to achieve the end values by 2030. This is the synthesis report that we prepared as an outcome of the analysis we have been developing so far. And the synthesis report includes the OECD checklist for public action to localize the SDGs. And it is based, I think this can be very useful for local administration because it is based on 5 main categories. And for each of these categories, the OECD is providing specific recommendation to local and regional administration on how to localize the SDGs. In particular, these dimensions are policy and strategy, multi-level governance, financing and budgeting, data information, and stakeholder engagement. One of the key messages of our program so far is that the SDGs are not just a compliance agenda that cities, regions, and national government can use to measure progress towards the SDGs. This is, of course, an important component, but the SDGs can also be, there is an opportunity for local administration and for regional administration to use the SDGs as a policy-making tool, to use the SDGs as a tool to improve the local development plan, policy, and action, and also to address some of the territorial development challenges. For example, I will just give you 3 examples that are emerging from our work. The first one is that the SDGs can be used to address the challenge of transport, sustainable mobility, and greenhouse gas emissions. For example, the city of Bonn in Germany, that is one of our pilots, identify SDG 11 on city as the guiding principle, and is trying to measure, is measuring, and is also using the SDGs to manage the synergies and the trade-off between the SDG 11 on city and the SDG 7 on energy and the SDG 13 on climate. So the local administration in the city of Bonn is really trying to make the most of this integrated framework that the SDGs are providing. And in particular, to be even a bit more concrete, what they are doing is to try to understand how the SDGs can help to manage the trade-off between the need to strengthen the sustainable mobility and the public transport dimension in the city of Bonn, but at the same time, the need to maintain the green areas of the cities, because this is an important objective for the local administration, and the need to increase the provision of affordable housing. So here the administration has 3 potentially competing objectives, and the SDGs can help to manage this trade-off. Second objective is use of the SDGs is to see how the SDGs can help to promote green growth for a city, at the same time to overcome some social challenges. This is what the city of Kitakyushu is doing, for example. The city of Kitakyushu was one of the first cities that used the SDGs and produced a voluntary local review to the United Nations. And what they are doing is to see how one of their strengths, that is the environmental dimension, so the environmental sustainability, because we always need to remember that sustainability is not just environment, but sustainability includes the 3 dimensions of sustainable development, meaning environment, society, and economy. So the city of Kitakyushu is trying to use one of their strengths, the environmental dimension, to create some job opportunities for green growth, for circular economy, for the local population, in particular for the youth, and at the same time to provide some opportunity for the elderly population in this sector. So again, is connecting the 3 dimensions of sustainable development through the SDGs. Finally, this is my 3rd example on how to use the SDGs for policy making. Here we have the county of Viken, that is a region in Norway, and they are using the SDGs to promote urban-rural linkages and to manage also some presentation again.
I think any kind of problem, maybe, Stefano, we are correcting it. Just a moment.
Now it's back.
Okay.
So basically, the county of Viken, this region in Norway, is using the SDGs to promote balanced territorial development, because it's the biggest region in Norway. So it's composed by the urban areas around the city of Oslo and some very remote rural areas. And what they are doing is to see how the SDGs can help to promote opportunities for example, opportunities for the rural population by using the proximity with the urban areas. And also the county of Viken used the SDGs to merge 3 different regions, because until 1.5 years ago, basically Viken didn't exist. So they created this new county, the county of Viken, and the SDGs became the framework to merge these 3 counties. In addition, we are in the last year and a half, we did some work to understand how the SDGs can be. An important point that I would like to stress is that the role of the audit institution for the implementation of the SDGs. We did some analysis and we saw that there are some examples at the national level so far on how audit courts can be engaged, are more and more engaged with the implementation of the SDGs. And the challenge is now to let's say, implement this methodology at the local level. For example, at the national level, we have the Belgian Court of Audit that examined how the various governments in Belgium are explicitly committing to the SDGs, and they are also organizing their efforts towards this goal. In Canada, there was a similar assessment, and they were even a bit more in depth. What they assess how the commitment to meet the SDGs by 2030. And they also saw that there was the need for more commitment and for more work to achieve. Basically, the government were not on track to achieve the SDGs, so there was a need to strengthen this component. Again, the challenge is now to bring to percolate this approach at the local and regional level. But we were lucky enough to work with the state of Parana in the framework of this program, and we saw that. From the work that we did so far at the regional level, Parana is really one of the few examples where an audit court is involved in the localization of the SDGs. So it was really, we can really consider Parana a front runner on this, and also how they managed to develop this methodology to measure how the budget was allocated to the different SDGs. This was also another best practice that we are promoting also in our synthesis report. What I was mentioning before is that during the pandemic, we work with various local and regional government, in particular with our pilot, to understand how the SDGs can provide a framework for cities and regions to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. We saw that more and more cities and regions consider the SDGs as really the framework that can help them to develop long-term strategy and not just to respond to the emergency of the pandemic. For example, just a data that stresses the importance of the SDGs for cities and regions. We just conducted a survey together with the European Committee of Regions, that is the European Association, basically grouping all the local and regional government in Europe. And in this survey that we conducted from May to June, we had about 150 responses, and 44% of the respondents told us that they were not using the SDGs before the pandemic, but they're planning to do so now to respond to the pandemic. So there is really a strong recognition of the role of the SDGs to respond to the pandemic at the local and regional level. How local and regional governments are doing so? we are seeing that there are three main areas that are very useful for local and regional government to use the SDGs as a tool to respond to the pandemic. The first one is that the SDGs provide a framework to identify local place-based priority, which are directed towards sustainability. I already mentioned what the city of Moscow or the city of Bonn is doing in Germany. Another example can be the city of Moscow in Russia that is using the SDGs as a checklist to ensure that local development programs are in line with sustainable development outcomes. And this is even more important now during the pandemic. The second advantage of the SDGs is that they allow to promote coordination across national, regional, and local level of government. And here we have two examples, Germany and Japan, where the central government and the national government are providing support, technical and financial support to their city and to the region to localize the SDGs. And this coordination is extremely important because we saw that during the pandemic, the countries in the OECD that they were the most active country to respond, a more successful country to respond to the pandemic, were the one that managed to put in place very effective coordination mechanism across levels of government. So the SDGs can really provide a tool also to do so. And third, the SDGs provide a framework, a tool for local administration to engage with the civil society, with the private sector, and with the citizens. So they are really a tool to, can be a stakeholder engagement tool. And the city of Kópavogur in Iceland is doing so because they developed the local development strategy for the SDGs, but they did this through, they also created in parallel a stakeholder engagement process to engage the local population in the implementation of the SDGs. And also the state of Paraná is a good practice because the 2030 agenda is used as a tool to engage and to communicate with the civil society, with the youth. We also saw how the youth are involved in Paraná with the SDGs and with the creative industries. Just a few words to conclude my presentation on the case of Paraná in Brazil and the specific findings that are emerging from the policy dialogue with the state. The SDGs, the focus of the case study of Paraná was how the SDGs, how the local administration can use the SDGs to reduce territorial disparities among the municipality in the state of Paraná. And what we saw is that there is a potential for the SDG to do so. And in particular, Paraná has been using the SDGs as a tool and as a framework to reduce, to address some of the challenges that are confronting the state, in particular in the area of health, education, and safety. In terms of planning and strategies, Paraná is aligning its multi-year plan for 2020-2023 and other planning tool and budgeting tool with the SDGs, including the one of the methodology of the audit court that I mentioned before, to face these territorial disparities among municipalities. As I mentioned before, we use our OECD local indicator framework and the data information provided by the state of Paraná to identify some of the strengths and some of the challenges that are still confronting the state of Paraná. We are seeing just three key findings that I would like to mention are that Paraná, the performance towards the SDGs are slightly lower than the OECD average for regions. But at the same time, the state is outperforming the majority of the other states in Brazil. We can, in terms of sectoral performance, we can see that some good performance are, for example, in SDG 6, that is the preservation of water bodies, SDG 14 in the coastal protection, SDG 11 air pollution level, and finally, last but not least, a very strong performance of the state of Paraná is the electricity production that is almost exclusively produced through renewable energy. So in terms of, in particular, in terms of the environmental dimension, Paraná is showing some very strong performance. At the same time, some challenges that are still confronting the state, as I mentioned before, are education, sustainable city and communities, and safety. Based on this analysis, the analysis of the policy and the strategy, the analysis of the performance of the state, and the analysis of the multi-level governance framework for sustainability in the state of Paraná in Brazil, we are suggesting 7 recommendations for the state of Paraná. In particular, the first one is to very briefly upscale the use of the SDGs as a policy-making tool to reduce socioeconomic disparities within and across municipalities. The state already started doing so, but with this recommendation, we are encouraging the state to continue and to strengthen this approach. The second recommendation is to strengthen the state coordination of policy and action with the municipalities from the one end, and with the federal government on the other end. The third one is to mainstream the SDGs in the municipal budgetary tools. The fourth recommendation is to leverage the state audit court methodology developed to monitor budgetary alignment with the SDGs at the municipal level. The fifth one is to strengthen the data collection and statistics to measure progress on the SDGs at the local level. Sixth one is to further engage a large company and SMEs in the implementation of the SDGs. And the seventh recommendation is to strengthen the engagement of citizens in the implementation of the 2030 agenda. There are already many good examples of the state of Paraná engaging citizens to the SDGs, but the idea is really to continue doing so. And my last word is that this is the result of the first phase of the project that we developed with the state of Paraná. The project concluded this first phase at the end of June, when we launched the report of Paraná. And now the Paraná was the first of our pilot to move towards in the second phase of this program. And in the second phase, we are really going to support the state in implementing this recommendation. So we are really looking forward to continue this work with the state of Paraná and to work also with you. Hopefully we will come to Brazil in a few months, maybe in February. And we really would like to work with you to implement this recommendation and maybe also to identify other recommendations for the state of Paraná. With this, I will conclude. Thank you very much for the attention, and for any question, I'm at your disposal.
Okay, Stefano, we thank you very much for your speech. In this end of your speech, you answered a question that I would propose for you in the end of our live. The gap between the recommendations that have been done and the need of effectuation of the actions from these recommendations. But you cleared this question in the end of your speech. I thank you too much. It was interesting, the vision that you give us this afternoon about the difficulties that we have to measure the realization, the effectuation of the public policies related to the sustainable development, especially in a country as Brazil, which is a federation with different governments. We have here a central one government, we called here in Portuguese União Federal, but we also have the regional governments, for example, Paraná, here from where I speak to you, and also the counties governments, the municipalities governments, which a division not so much clear propose respect to the powers and the obligations that each one of these governments have in our federal constitution. But it was very, very, very clear, everything you told us. I am very happy to have the opportunity to listen to you this afternoon. We are following our live with my friend Décio Velasquez from TCU, the Federal Audit Court. It's a pleasure, Décio, have you here this afternoon with us. All the work that you and your team do in the TCU, I don't have doubtless, it's very, very, very important for the monitoring that we must do in the political institutions, in public institutions. I think we don't need to discuss the importance of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals from OECD. What I don't have doubtless is about the need we have about a serious discussion that we have to do about the ways and kinds of how to monitor it, how to verify, how to propose actions about them, and especially about the acts, programs, and plannings from governments through which it will become possible we advance in this matter here in Brazil. By the way, I would like you, Desho, told us about the work that was done and the work that has been done by TCU, by your team, coordinated by you in relation to the audits and monitoring the accounts of the government. I know, and you told me in the meeting we had before this live, that you coordinated and participated of 2 audits in the years 2016, 2017, 2018, about this kind of problem. Later, we are going to talk about some instruments, some tools, some technology tools that TCU have been used in his work. So the words for you, again, in the name of Tribunal de Contas do Paraná and Escola de Gestão Pública do Estado do Paraná, I'd like to thank you very much for your participation here this afternoon. Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Flavio. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you also to the State of Courts of the State of Paraná for promoting this event. Like you said, I think it's a very important debate, and I'm always very happy to share a bit about TCU's perspectives on sustainability and the Sustainable Development Goals. I'd also like to compliment Stefano on his brilliant presentation. It's very interesting to see that OECD has this territorial approach to the SDGs. I think we in TCU, since I work with environment there, and environment is a theme that brings this territorial approach. So we are also in constant need of putting a territorial approach into our work. And recently I have participated in an audit about protected areas that was all about territory. We had the participation of some court accounts in the states of the Amazonian states. And I'm gonna mention briefly this audit in this presentation as well. So it's very interesting, and I agree that it's important that the SDGs are an important tool to promote this coordination among institutions at different levels, especially in Brazil, where we have this challenge of coordinating the federal level, the state level, the municipality level. So it's very important. Okay, so I'm gonna share my presentation, my screen here. Just a moment, please. Can you see my presentation? Can you see the cover?
Yeah, it's possible.
Okay. So like I said, I'm going to talk today about sustainability and the 2030 agenda and a few of the works TCU has been conducting in this theme. So this is an image that always comes to our mind when we talk about sustainable development. We always think about the environment first, I'd say. But the thing about the sustainable development is that it actually has 3 dimensions. United Nations framework, the 2030 agenda says that sustainable development has 3 dimensions: the environmental, the economic, and the social. So the economic dimension would be about prosperity, about producing wealth. The environmental dimension would be about doing that without exhausting our planet's resources and leaving for the future generations. And also, you can really have sustainable development if you don't share the benefits, this wealth among people. So that's why the social dimension is also here. And that is a huge challenge. And there are many actors responsible for promoting sustainable development. I would say that the government might be, if not the most relevant one of the main ones. But there are also other actors, such as the private sector, the civil society, the academia, the citizens, international organization, and finally, us, the control institutions. So the contribution of institutions to promoting sustainable development is so great that in TCU, we like to add a fourth dimension, which is the institutional dimension. If you search literature about sustainable development, you will see that there are more dimensions beyond these three that the United Nations talks about. One of them is the institutional. There are others, for example, technological, cultural, but these three are the main ones. But for us, the institutional dimension is very important. And we translate that as governance. And I'm going to explain why. So this kind of presentation always brings this slide, which shows the 17 sustainable development goals. But the 2030 agenda is actually a lot more than just the goals. It has a framework for a strategy for implementing the SDGs, a strategy for following them up, for reviewing, for communicating the progress towards the sustainable development. And so it's not just about the goals, even though the goals give the direction. And if you notice, if you pay attention, you will see that neither of these 17 goals, they're novelty to the governments. The governments have always been pursuing the fight against poverty. They have always been trying to reduce hunger. They have policies for providing good health services, quality education. So none of these goals are really a novelty. So I like to make this provocation. What's new about the SDGs? Well, it seems like we have been working with them for ages now. So I think that the great novelty that the SDGs bring is these principles, which we must incorporate, embed into our work. For example, integration and indivisibility. The SDG goals and targets, they can't be pursued in an individual manner. You have to consider the impact targets have on each other. And for that, we need a cross-cutting approach. So we can't look at a single target or at a single public policy. We must look at other policies that are related to that target or to that policy. And that brings, if you do that, you can pursue coherence between public policies so they won't conflict with each other. And these other two principles are also very important, which is the inclusiveness, which is that the agenda translates as leaving no one behind. You have to identify the most vulnerable segments of the society, and you have to give a special attention to them. And you also have to build partnerships so you can have means of implementing the goals. These are some of the TCU's initiatives in the years, like Flavio has mentioned, in the years from 2016 to 2018, we have conducted this coordinated audit on the preparedness of Latin American governments for implementing the SDGs. We also have this audit tool, which is called the DFOG analysis, which stands for duplication, fragmentation, overlap, and gap. We also have another audit tool specific for SDGs, which is the government assessment gauge for SDGs. And I'm also going to comment a little bit about a massive open online course we have on the theme of SDGs. So let's first talk about the SDG coordinated audits. Actually, this process was two processes. The first process ran from 2016 to 2017. And it was a pilot audit we conducted only in the federal level. So it was only TCU. And we did that because we needed to test the methodology we would provide in the second stage of this audit, which would be the coordinated audit. We already had the plan of conducting these coordinated audits with other countries. So we needed to prepare a methodology for that. And also for us, so we could follow up the progress towards the agenda through the next years. So from 2017 and 2018, we had this coordinated audit inside of an international organization of supreme audit institutions. We had participation of 11 countries, 12 audit institutions. One of them were the Court of Accounts of the province of Buenos Aires, which is in the subnational level. So we had a bit of the territorial approach here as well, the internalization of the SDGs in the state level, in Argentina in this case. And we were evaluating not the implementation of the SDGs itself. Because it was the beginning of the agenda, so we decided to look on the preparedness of the governments for implementing the SDGs. So we understood the concept of preparedness as the presence of governance mechanisms in the center of government and in the sectoral bodies and agencies that could allow the institutionalization, the implementation, and the achievement of the 2030 agenda. So for that, we needed to conduct an examination both in the center of government level and in the sectoral level. And for that, we needed to choose a target so that could serve as a pilot audit. And we chose target 2.4, which is inside our area of actuation, of our department's actuation. This target is related to the sustainability in food production systems. And when we talk about the specific target in the SDGs, even though they're specific, they're still very broad. Many policies contribute to the achievement of this one target. So this slide here is just to show how broad this theme is. And these are already the findings. So in the level of the center of government, we found that there were deficiencies in the institutionalization of the agenda in Brazil. So even though there had been some progress so far, there were still some pending activities. And in the governance corner, we found that there were still some deficiencies in some of the mechanisms that could help implementing the SDGs, such as the lack of a long-term national plan, the lack of an integrated risk management strategy, and the lack of an integrated follow-up and review strategy. And before I go into the findings on target 2.4, I must give you a little bit of context. So we did this examination in a lot of policies, like I have shown before, but we chose one public policy to start as a starting point, and that was our public policy for organic food production. And then from there, we started mapping other policies that had relations to this first policy. For example, we do have a policy for low carbon agriculture, which was fairly well aligned to the first one. We also have a policy for technical assistance to farmers, and that policy was not so well aligned, so that's why it's marked in red here. And from ministries and agencies involved in this theme, we also heard that there were at least two policies that were needed back then, but they weren't in place, which were a policy for promoting the reduction of the use of pesticides, and another policy for providing sustainable alternatives to pesticides, because you can't just promote the reduction if you can't offer an option, an alternative. And we also found some policies that initially we weren't looking at. For example, the policy of rural credits and insurance. The criteria for giving these benefits, they weren't well aligned to the target 2.4. And at the same time, we found that pesticides receive many tax exemptions. For example, they are exempt from trading, from production in Brazil, also from importation. So in the end, the conclusion was that in Brazil, we actually had also a policy for promoting the use of pesticides. And the thing I'd like to highlight here is that we have a policy for promoting organic food production, also a policy in practice for promoting the use of pesticides. And in some moments they will conflict, and that may lead to some inefficiency in the public administration, because they will have policies that go in sometimes in different directions, and that leads to the waste of resources. And maybe sometimes even one may stop the other from reaching its goals. So having this cross-cutting perspective really helped us to see things that we wouldn't be able to see if we looked at a single policy. So the findings were about target 2.4. The findings were a lack of a cross-cutting coordination, leading to the misalignments that I just commented. And specifically for the case of the tax exemptions, a lack of definition of an agency responsible for their supervision, because even though it's a tax exemption, it's still a public policy. And in consequence, the lack of a follow-up and review routine. So we couldn't even know if that policy was producing its results or if it was impacting other policies. And after the results in national level, I will comment a little bit about the results in Latin American level. We use this audit tool, which is the Sdg Radar, for assessing the implementation of governance mechanisms in all countries that participated in the audit. And these are the averages of the assessments. So I'd like to highlight 2 points, which is the national long-term plan. We found that most of the countries that participated in the audit also didn't have a long-term plan, just like Brazil. And it came as a surprise when they did. And in consequence, they also lacked national follow-up and review strategies at a national level. And this is all I had to share about this audit. And if you want to know more information, you can access TCU's website and look for the communication products and about the SDG audit. You have these products, these colorful products here. You can access in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. And if you want full details on the audits, you can access the full reports. They are available in Portuguese. And thank you. Dr. Flavio, I think you don't have your sound is off. I think Dr. Flavio is on mute.
Can you hear me, Dachel?
Now I can, yeah.
Okay, let me enjoy to ask you something more, Dachel. I don't know if it's possible we talk something about the Moscow letter. We had some questions for the end of this live. I don't know if I can anticipate this question for you at this moment, and in some minutes do the same question to Stefano about how would it be possible for the institutions of external control of administration, of public administration, as TCU, as TCE do Paraná, to help and to provide any kind of help for the public institutions to achieve these SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals of OECD. We know that we have many kinds of different problems in Brazil. We're discussing at this moment in October 2021, the problems we have with electrical energy. We have climate problems that impacts in all this kind of question. And I don't know how the external control of public administration could provide a kind of help for the governments, the federal government, the state governments, and mainly the municipal government. I don't know if you can explain something about this and do a kind of relation to the Moscow letter at this moment. Could it be possible?
Yes, of course. I understand from the Moscow letter that it identified the trend for as Supreme Audit institutions and audit institutions in general for trying to make recommendations that are more effective, and also to give more emphasis to data analysis. So I think that I brought here some audit tools that have some emphasis on that corner as well. So I can show them for you. And about the municipality and the state level, I think one possible answer from the control side is that we can try to invest on the coordinated audits, which is a way of conducting an audit that has the participation of many different control institutions. We have conducted a few in the last few years, mostly in international level, but it's also possible to conduct them in the national level. Actually, like I said, the audit in protected areas had the participation from the state of the court accounts of the states of the Amazonian states, and they are responsible. They also have jurisdiction on the municipal level. So I think it's a way that we can coordinate this kind of work and help them to have this effectiveness across all government levels. So I think I'm going to move on to the presentation on the audit tools. Okay. Okay. So.
Okay.
Okay, so the first tool I'm going to show you is the defog analysis. Like I said, the acronym stands for duplication, fragmentation, overlap, and gap. This is a tool that we actually adapted from GEO, which is the United States Supreme Audit Institution. And the original tool was a strategy that the GEO had for assessing duplication and overlaps among public programs. We brought that tool so we could use those in performance audits, and we adapted it. We turned the focus from programs to public policies, which is a much broader scope. And we also added a fourth category, which is the gap category. And I think this aligns to the Moscow letter because it really tries to see more strategic points where the SAIs can make recommendations that really tackle strategic issues. So these are the all four categories, the duplication, fragmentation, overlap, and gap. The fragmentation is when you have, for example, many agencies or many public policies dedicated to a single goal. And that may be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how it's managed. You have an overlap when you have more than one agency working on the same goal, perhaps with some overlap of attributions of roles or processes. The duplication would be a more extreme case of overlapping. And the gap is when you don't have something that should be in place. For example, when you don't have an agency that should be working, or when you don't have a public policy, or maybe some regulation, some law, or some process that is lacking. Or for example, when you don't tend to a specific segment of the society, that would be a gap. So these are a few of the steps we use to implement the DFOG analysis. First, we should identify the policies we want to assess. And in the SDG audit, we identified the organic food production as our key policy. And from there, we mapped other policies. Then, and this is a very important step of the analysis, because you can't add too many policies, because otherwise the scope will not become manageable. You have to take care of that. You have to keep the scope manageable. The second step, it's to identify the DFOG themselves, the duplication, fragmentations, overlaps, and gaps. And you can do that by reviewing documents or interviewing the managers, the leaders in the executive branch, or through access to information systems as well. And the third step is to identify the effects of these duplications, fragmentations, overlaps, and gaps, because they may have some positive effects as well. For example, the fragmentation may be needed so you can give more specific attention to different segments of the society. So it might be a good thing. The bad thing about the fragmentation is that sometimes you can't have a systemic view of the whole. But if you have good coordination mechanisms, you can also tend to that, you can avoid that problem. So it's important to assess the effects, the positive and the negative effects. This tool it contributes to an evaluation on the coordination and coherence of public policies. And it relates to SDGs in the way that SDGs are indivisible and they have interconnections. So it's a very appropriate tool for addressing SDGs and sustainability in general. I said I would mention briefly the coordinated audit on protected areas, because we also use this tool in this audit. And we asked all the countries and states participating to apply them as well. And specifically in two other policies besides the protected areas policy. For example, the green tourism and public use policy, and the land use policy. And we found, for example, that there was a fragmentation between the agencies and ministries that usually take care of environment and tourism at the national level. And we also found, for example, that there is lack of regulation for land use planning, and sometimes overlaps between territories destined for the conservation of biodiversity and for territories with other kinds of purposes. So this would be something that maybe we wouldn't be available to see if we didn't have this cross-cutting perspective and this audit tool that allows us to assess the coherence between public policies. So this is just an example on how we can use this kind of audit tool. And if you want more information about the audit or the audit tool, they are both in the same document, which is the report on the coordinated audit on protected areas. And in the same way as the SDGs, you can assess the communication products in English, Spanish, and Portuguese in our website, or the full reports in Portuguese. The next audit tools actually is a set of audit tools. In OLACEFs, which is International Organization for Latin American and Caribbean Supreme Audit Institutions, we have this task force in which we are developing many audit tools, which relates to many of the principles of the Moscow Letter. I would like to comment one of them, especially because that was the one that was made by TCU. So just to give some examples, these tools are still in development. They're not ready yet, but we've been working on them for more than 1 year now, and they should be available soon. And just to talk a little bit about the themes that they cover internal control systems, SDG indicator data quality, best practices in statistics, big data analytics, SDGs implementation and adaptation to the national context, and stakeholders engagement. And there is our tool, which deals with governance. So the tool I'm going to comment about is the governance assessment gauge for SDGs. The purpose of this audit tool is to check if there are governance mechanisms both in the center of government and SDG target levels, which was the goal of the audit as well. This tool was developed in the SDG audit, and it can be used in other contexts as well. So what we do is we assess the government components according to a scale that goes from 0 to 3, in which 0 is not implemented at all, and 3 is optimized. And we go through these other 2 stages, establishing and developing. And there are 11 components that we assess in the center of government level, and another 6 that we assess in the SDG target level. So just to give some example, one of the components we assess in the center of government level is the presence of a national medium-term plan. And from there, we got to the conclusion that most countries didn't have that kind of instrument. And on SDG target, we have the coordination and coherence, the cross-cutting coordination component, which assess just what I talked about, the coherence between public policies. And the fog analysis is actually a tool that will provide information for this assessment. And from that assessment, we produce the SDG Radar, which I have also shown before. So from that scale from 0 to 3, we put the assessment of each component in each axis, and we can communicate the results by the means of this SDG Radar that you see on the screen. And last but not least, our massive open online course on SDGs. We have developed this course in the beginning of the audit on SDGs as a strategy for all auditors from every country and every state that would participate in the audit would have the same concepts, the same knowledge about the theme, so we could start from the same level. And this course, it covers the role of Supreme Audit Institutions on promoting the sustainable development, the implementation of the SDGs and the 2030 Agenda. And it's available in Portuguese, Spanish, and English, and it can be accessed in TCU's website as well. So I think this is all I had to share about. Hopefully I stayed in my time. I hope it was useful for everybody. So I thank you very much. And okay, this is it.
It's always important to listen and to know the work that has been done by the Federal Court of Accounts, and it's very good. It was very good to listen and to hear to you, Dashiell. Your explanation was very didactic. It was very easy to comprehend all the work and the process of audits that you explained to us this afternoon. I thank you very much in the name of Paraná Court of Accounts and in the name of the Public Management School. I think that Stefano is with us until now. Stefano, I would like to enjoy these last minutes of our live to hear from you. What do you think that would be possible for to get these SDGs? How the external courts of control of public administration, as TCU, as TCE here in Paraná, could do about these goals, about a kind of a stimulation for the governments, for the municipal governments, for the regional governments to get these goals done, especially about the public purchases, the sustainable public purchases. In this moment that all the planet, everybody discuss the problems about the future relation to environmental. I don't know if it's possible, it would be.
It's a really good question, Flavio. Thank you very much. I think what we are seeing in our analysis is that the audit institutions are really, in particular at the national level, as I mentioned so far, they're really assessing the progress that the government are making towards the sustainable development goals. So we have many examples at the national level. We have a very good example in Paraná with TCE on what they are doing, what you are doing. So I think the first role is really the one of monitoring the performance of and the progress of public administration towards the SDGs, and this can be done at the national level, but also the local level, and also through this function of really auditing the performance towards the SDG target. I think the audit institution can also help to create accountable institution and so achieve the goal of the SDG 16 that was mentioned also by TCU before, so to promote strong and justice institution. I think another important function is analyze how public administration are allocating their budget, and see how much of this budget is contributing to the SDGs and to which SDGs. And this is really what the TCE has been doing, because with this methodology, they really analyze for each SDG how the budget is allocated. So this is also an opportunity in general to understand if a local or a national government is contributing to which priority, and if this priority are also maybe some of the challenge that the government has in terms of sustainable development. In terms of purchasing, what you mentioned, Flavio, is really relevant, because in most of our report, we are always stressing, and we are also always analyzing how sustainable public procurement can be a tool for the public administration to move towards sustainability, towards the SDGs. It can be a tool for the public administration also to provide some incentives to the private sectors to move towards the SDGs. And therefore, what you are seeing is that it's important to move beyond this idea of that when there is a public procurement, price is the only criteria. But more and more, we are seeing that local administration are moving towards this idea that sustainability criteria should be integrated, should be a criteria to select in a public procurement process, one institution or another. And therefore, the SDGs can be, the targets of the SDGs can also become a criteria for local administration to promote sustainability. And here there is a role to play again for the audit institution that can really monitor and check how public procurement processes are implemented, and if the sustainability criteria are respected or not.
Okay, thank you again, Stefano. I have to say something. I have to do a special acknowledgement for the team from the Public Management School of TCE Paraná that did possible this event, this live this afternoon. So thank you very much, Edilson Liberal, the director of the Public Management School. Thank you very much, Simone, Senira, Rafa, all the guys that worked very hard to this could happen this afternoon. And I would like to thank you very, very, very much, Stefano, for your presence here with us this afternoon. It was a big pleasure. È stato un piacere grandissimo averla qui. Deschel, thank you very much for the words, for the explanation clearly that you did this afternoon. And I would like to finish this live in the name of Tribunal de Contas do Estado do Paraná and in the name of Mr. President Fábio Camargo, to thank everybody that could give us your attention during some minutes. We are with almost 1 hour and a half the live. I think that we arrived at the limit. We had it. And thank you, guys. Bye-bye. Stay well and take care of your... Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Fabio. It was really a pleasure.
Thank you very much as well.
Yeah.
Bye.
Good weekend to you all.
For all of you. Bye-bye.